Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us at CESRAN2025, the 12th Annual Conference on International Studies. This year we are here at original place, actually, the Autonomous University of Lisbon. This is the 5th time we have had the conference at UAL. On that account, I'm thankful to Professor Tome and the university for the partnership. Of course, I would like to express our thanks to the rest of the conference partners. One of them is Ca' Foscari University of Italy and Ivane Giacoshvili, Tbilisi State University from Georgia, Political Science Research Center of University of Minho from Portugal. The other one is the Jakub Pardis University from Poland, and University of Macau from China, Uludağ University from Turkey, and the European University of Atlantico from Spain. They put huge amount of effort of this conference, and that conference happened at a result of that kind of effort. And I'm delighted to see such a distinguished assembly of academics on CESRAN 2025. We have 112 participants and 17 panels this year. Since I'm eager to delve into the keynote speeches and panels during the 5 days, I don't want to take up your time. Professor Ramunda, Deputy Director General of Cesran International, and I would like to thank all the participants. Without your participation, we couldn't have put together such a conference here. And we are already planning to have CESRAN 2026, and we'll share the location soon with your emails, and I hope to see you there as well. And in this sense, I would like to give a nice and fruitful conference before starting keynote speeches today. And we have great speakers, keynote speakers, and Professor Richard Hu from University of Macau and Professor Tome from UAL. And we are going to start with Professor Richard Hu. He is going to give us a lecture about the Trump administration 2.0 and the transformation of the world order. Before starting the speech, I would like to give short biography of Professor Hu. Professor Hu was educated at Peking University in China, and then MA from the Johns Hopkins University Science, and a PhD from University of Maryland, College Park. He was John Olin Fellow at Harvard University in 1991 and 1992, and IGCC postdoctoral fellow at University of California, San Diego in 1992 and 1993. He taught and held a research position at UC San Diego, Monterey Institute of International Studies, and University of Detroit before joining the faculty of University of Hong Kong in 1997. He has taught over 20 years at University of Hong Kong, where he was Professor of Political Science, Head of Department of Politics and Public Administration, a member of the Senate, and Vice Chairman of the University Committee on Discontinuation. He also held visiting positions at the University of Georgia, the Brookings Institution, Uppsala University, and National University of Singapore. His teaching and research interests focus on international political economy, China and East Asia, China's foreign relations, and governance and public policy in Hong Kong, Macau, and Greater China. He was president of Hong Kong Political Science Association from 2012 to 2014. He served in the Pan-Per River Delta panel of the Hong Kong SAR Government Central Policy Unit from 2009 and 2012. Currently, he is a counselor of the China-United States Exchange Foundation and the president of the Hong Kong Association of Overseas Returned Scholars. So Professor Chitu will give us a 30-minute long keynote speech today. Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Özgür, for your very nice introduction. I also want to thank the organization committee of CESRAN2025 for inviting me to give a keynote speech here. And I think the Center for International Research and Analysis, CESRAN, is a very good platform for international scholar exchange on issues related to political science and international relations. And I also want to thank my good friend, Professor Tome, who's the professor and the director of International Relations Studies program or department here at the Autonomous University of Lisbon, and who paid a visit to University of Macau earlier this year, and we have a very good conversation. I also find out we have a shared interest to study international law, international order, and the emerging issues in international relations. So I will very happy to share the floor with him in the same panel. We're going to discuss the same topic, the Trump administration, Trump 2, and its impact on transformation of world order. He's going to give a European perspective, and my speech will probably represent China or Asian perspective. So you can listen and then view this two perspective in a complementary way. And I have to say, I apologize, I did not prepare a PPT. And but there's a reason for that. In today's classroom teaching, professor over-depend on PPT. Professor come to the classroom, we read the PPT, and then we send the PPT to the students afterwards. So students basically did not pay attention to your lecture at all. They just browsing their phone, listen to music, or do whatever they want in the classroom. So that's why I deliberately not prepare PPT in the teaching. And then to have eye contact with them and then force them to listen to me. I find this is sometimes a more effective way to get attention. But this is not the reason for today. I did not prepare the PPT. But I think you will see the two perspectives. Louis' perspective will be in presenting the PPTs, more graphic, more convincing, and it shows a lot of details and facts about the transformation of world order. So my perspective is based on my research about international order and the transformation of order. 2021, I published a book on the transformation of world order and Sino-U.S. role in transformation of order. The topic is about contesting revisionism. My co-author and me, we contest and debate with the mainstream IR scholars about who is the revisionism to the international order. What is the source of change for today's international order? So you're welcome to look at that book. And also this year, in the March, Steve Chen and myself, we published an article in International Affairs, the journal published by the Chatham House in London. We talk about the fate of liberal international order, and then also talk about China's role in this changing of international order. So you're welcome to look at these articles. Today, I'm going to talk about Trump 2 and the transformation of world order. I plan to talk about 4 issues. The first issue is what is the impacts of Trump 2 on the world order and global geopolitics. Number 2, I'm going to talk about why do we see the world order is in transformation now, today. And the third big issue is I'm going to deal with is about how the world order is transformed, the process of transformation of world order. And then last one, but not the least, the future prospect of the world order. Now, start with the first issues. Now, our world is changing fast. 2020 to 2023, we have saw the world have experienced an unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. Before the pandemic ended, in February 2022, the Ukraine war broke out. Russians and Ukraine are still fighting now. So they are struggling to have a solution about the war. These wars have huge impact on global geopolitics and in changing the dynamics of world order and then big power politics and also Western alliance. The peace negotiation is ongoing, and then how the war will end will have tremendous impact on the future world order. Conflict between Israel and Hamas, conflict between Israel and Iran are changing the regional dynamics in the Middle East. And another phenomenon we have seen is the expansion of the BRICS countries, and then from 5 to 11 now, and in future is continue to expand. So this is changing the global trade and the diplomatic configurations. And you can see Saudi Arabia, India are playing more assertive role in world trade and diplomacy. US-China rivalry is intensified, particularly in the economic and also in the technology dimension, with the AI, with the data science, semiconductors areas is becoming the key issues. Global market experience turbulence due to the Trump tariff, due to the fluctuation of oil price and other key minerals price is changing. So the world especially experienced something unexpected, which is Trump's reciprocal tariff announced on April 2nd of this year, so-called Liberation Day. Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariff have plunged the world into turbulence because the unprecedented scale and then retaliatory dynamics it triggers. So the future economic repercussion of these reciprocal tariff is still unfolding. The tariff, including a universal 10% levy on all U.S. imports and then country-specified tariff rate up to, when it's announced, is a 49%, and now later on escalated to 125, 145%. So this is the largest US tariff hike since the Smith-Hartley Act of 1930. The Trump tariff triggered a wide retaliation from trading partners like China. China this time is very firm, retaliate, and to the end with Trump, not like this first time. And EU, Canada also scale in the retaliation. So, for instance, China raised its tariff rate on U.S. imports to 125%, and not until the London negotiation, the Geneva negotiation first, and then London talk, the two sides decided to pause this tariff hikes. So Trump's American first trade policy and the trade wars with almost all parties, trading parties in the world, not only reshape the economic, geopolitical, and the supply chain dynamics in the world, but also wobbled the global trade regimes and the global economic order since World War II. Different from his first terms, Donald Trump is more determined and more focused on implementing his American first trade agenda. So in China, it is popular to talk about a phrase called great changes unseen in a century, 百年未有大变局. This is a theme the Chinese scholar use a lot to discuss international change and war and changing the world order. It is a key concept in the Chinese political rhetoric created and used frequently by President Xi Jinping to describe the profound political transformation, undertaking in the world order. The phrase suggests a few things. First, the decline of U.S. dominance in the world economic and then political systems. Second, the weakening of the Western-led institutions, since World War II. Third, the rise of China and the rise of the global South as a new center of economic and political influence. And fourth, the technology revolution, such as AI and green technology, is reshaping the global competitiveness. I think these are the big ideas. This concept are changing our big background reasons why we see social change and the global order is changing. These are the big background issues. And today I'm not going to focus on these big background issues. Maybe Luis will talk about that. But I will focus on more intermediate, short-term reasons why world order is changing, and then what's the impact of Donald Trump to bring us. So I will not use the grand theory to discuss long-term historical cycles, and I'm more focused on intermediate and the current reasons that prompt the transformation of world order. Now, in terms of the more intermediate reasons, we see the world order is undergoing transformation. There are two major things we need to focus on. First is Donald Trump's policy and its impact on the world geopolitics and geoeconomics. Second is Ukraine war. So let me start with the first issues. Trump policy Trump Trump 2.0, its implication for the world's geopolitics and economic situations. Now, in my view, Trump 2 foreign policy agenda is clear and straightforward. And we all seen the presidential election result in the US 2024. And Trump have won both electoral college and the popular vote in 2024 presidential elections. And not landslide, but it's still big margin against his Democratic opponents. So that gave him a very strong political mandate to focus on his American First agenda. So compared with his first term, he has more ambitious MAGA or MEGA agenda for the second terms. So if you go to the White House website on January 20th this year, the first day he took office, the White House website published his Trump American First priorities. What is the American First priorities? They put it into 4 dimensions. First, make America safe again. Second, make America affordable, energy dominant again. Third, drain the swamp. Drain the swamp means cut the federal debt and streamline the government, the size of government. And then last, bring back American values. This is published on the White House website. And Trump means what he says, and he's trying to deliver now. Building on American First doctrine, Trump's 2's agenda want to conduct a very unilateralist and a transactional foreign policy. The policy is characterized by American First unpredictability, a focus on intermediate interest over long-term global cooperation. So, which means his policy will be at expense of global cooperation, strain the alliance, and then heighten the big power competition, especially with China. First, let's look at his economic agenda, showing his Liberation Day tariff on this April 2nd. Trump is waging a trade war against the world, everybody included. I'm not sure about the tariff rate with the political. Still, it's same with EU, right? Same with EU. So it will be hard time for you to swallow. And this is tariff war against almost all trading partners. Trump have revived his tariff man. He used to say tariff is the most beautiful word in vocabulary. And then he proposed sweeping tariffs on all major partners. And if you retaliate, he will double the retaliatory rate. He will punish you. And the Canada is now being punished. This risk, the global trade fragmentation and inflation. And then the global supply chain is in trouble. And the retaliatory measures from other countries also, send the world market into tumbling. And so you can see a lot of trade diversions and a high cost, and then also prompt countries looking for regional solution. Trump's economic nationalist agenda It's not just only for tariff revenues. So we also wonder what is behind his Trump's thinking. Is he really looking for reduce U.S. trade tariff or to reduce U.S. trade deficit? Sometimes no. The deficit probably is not his major concern. He wants to bring the job back to U.S. But can you imagine bring back iPhone assembly back to U.S.? Can U.S. afford that? What's the price of the iPhone in the future? The people also doubt about that. And then how about use the tariff generate more revenue to finance his tax cut? Yes, he have big and beautiful bills passed by Senate a few days ago, and he want to have a big tax reduction for American public. But the tariff revenue he collect is still very small. So people also doubt about that will be the solution for his tariff policy. So how about he want to change his trading partners' behavior? Ask China to change China's development model, recut the subsidies. That's probably also not something achievable. And how about he want to? People are still thinking hard about what's the motivation, what he can achieve, and one of the major reason is the national debt of the United States is now $37 trillion. So even the interest per year is $1.3 trillion per year. That's huge burden. That's huge burden. But can he use this tariff to finance that? Also not quite possible. So we'll see. So what he can achieve. So Trump is also tightening controls on high-tech semiconductors, AI product, especially export to China. He's tightened the competition with China on high-tech areas. I will not go to details. Now turn to defense policy. Trump's defense policy have a key item, which is peace through strength. Trump pressure NATO allies to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. 5%, that's a lot of money. We are used to 1% or 2% GDP, but he asked everybody double, more than double. That's a big call. And he threatened if you don't increase your defense spending, will pull out, will withdraw U.S. security commitment to Europe and other Asian allies. So that's why transatlantic relations, I think, is in trouble. And then last week, people were joking, American daddies talking, and because NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called Trump daddy. And this is and then from the CNN transcript, and Trump talking about this, he's pretty happy to be called daddy. And the NATO countries, so there's a reporter asked if people call you daddy, is NATO countries are your children? And then this is what his response. No, Mark Rutte like me. I think he likes me. And if he doesn't, I will let him know. I will come back. I will hit him hard. Okay? He did this very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. So this is what he said. This is I can't imagine this is transatlantic relations. He put it in a way, daddy and the children. If you don't listen to me, I'll hit you hard. It's like watching kids fighting each other in a football ground, and he portray himself as daddy. This is almost unthinkable. And then in the Asia Pacific, same thing, no different. American threatens South Koreans and Japan to increase defense spending, and otherwise, and also put a high tariff on these two countries' export to U.S. These two countries are struggling with U.S. now, and so that's why I think almost all U.S. allies are struggling with U.S. on tariff. And so that's why you see only one country stand up against Trump, play hardball, is China. So China's role is very important these days. So that's why he decided we first need to get China dealt. Otherwise, nobody will follow. So his attitude to China is becoming a little bit soft. He's eager to reach a deal with China now, and he even promised, "I will lead a big delegation to visit China soon." And he said he's considering whether attending China's September 3rd parade. The parade China is scheduled on September 3rd, like Russians Red Squares parade. This is the 80th anniversary of end of World War II in China. So we call it anti-Japanese war victory parade. So let's see whether he will come to China and show up in the September 3rd. Now turn to multilateral institution. Trump is very skeptical toward global multilateral institutions. And like his first term, he withdrew from more multilateral institutions and replaced them with transactional bilateral deals. And his American First doctrines emphasize on national sovereignty at the expense of international cooperation and an alliance commitment. And Trump believes the cost of a U.S. commitment to multilateral institution outweigh the benefit of the joining these institutions. For Americans, it is a burden to policing the globe now and playing the leadership role in global governance. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said the post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon being used against the United States. Louis used the same quote. And then other countries had gotten used to it, a foreign policy in which you act in the national interest of your country. We, the United States, sort of act in the interest of the global or the global order. Under the President Trump, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing it what you want, which means he want to turn the table over. So that means U.S. has becoming what he says. U.S. is becoming a sucker of the world order. So everybody taking advantage of us. So we want to turn the table now. So that's a current U.S. thinking. And in the January 2025 New York Times have a poll. 60% of respondents wanted the U.S. to pay less attention to the problem overseas and concentrate on the problem here at home. So this is also an indication of the American populism. Want to focus more on the domestic issues. So on the first day of his second terms, Trump withdraw from WHO, UN Human Rights Council, and other international organizations. He dismantled U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and he defunded National Endowment for Democracy, VOA, and a lot of other programs. So this is what Trump's think about the multilateral institutions. And Trump revealed he has some kind of affection to other strong leaders in the world. He like Vladimir Putin. He said that very openly. He like Hungarian Prime Minister Okto. Yeah, and also he said Xi Jinping. He pay tribute to Xi Jinping. Call him a exceptional, brilliant leader. Blah blah blah. So Trump is a guy care less about traditional moral values. He care more about interest. He conduct policy and deal with other countries in a transactional way, like a businessman, like making a deal. So his cabinet member call him the greatest deal maker in the history. Deal maker in history. So he sees everything, even the Ukraine war. He want to make a deal with Russia. So he want to make, he basically is a deal maker in international relations. So you can imagine, the previous American administration take pride in leading the Western alliance against Russian aggression. He can change overnight. And a lot of things you can see he changing overnight, flip-flopped. And then he see the world like 200 years ago, like the power struggle. We're going back to the rule of jungle. This is what his concept of today's international relation and world politics. And because he openly talking about we will reclaim Panama Canal. He want to take over Greenland from Denmark. He want to disparate the ideas of Canada being U.S. 51st state. He's still talking about that. So this man is really so. In sum, the Trump administration is likely to form an economic. Is likely to focus on economic nationalism, reducing the emphasis on multilateralism, human rights, and focusing on transactional bilateralism, intensify great power competition with China, and to implement this policy. He preferred domestic interest over international commitment, short-term over long-term interest. His vision is return to a 19th century power politics and a sphere of interest. He's have a strong antipathy toward globalism, multilateralism, entangling alliance, and involving in the war in the distant countries. So when he decided to bomb Iran, he's thinking about that, whether he will involve in the war in there. So Trump has virtually pronounced the fall of the post-war order associated with the American leadership is over. So that's my reading of the Trump's impact on globalism, on the global order. So I need to speed up, right? Yeah, okay. So Trump's impact on the global order is the erosion of multilateralism, the rise of American unilateralism, sovereignist policy, and then strategic competition with other major powers, weakening of international institutions as a result, and pushing all the American alliance into forming a new regional bloc. So everybody is thinking about regional solutions. Europeans talking about strategic autonomy. Asian countries talk about RCEP, talking about the regional alliance. So now let me turn to the second big questions. Why world order is in transformation? I think three words can characterize the current problem or crisis of world order: fragmentation, the rise of multipolarity, and then the increase of uncertainty. Talk about uncertainty. The biggest uncertainty source is Trump, Donald Trump, and his government. His unpredictable style of foreign policy, his personality. I could spend a lot of time talking about his personality, but for the sake of time, I skip that part. And the unpredictability also come from his foreign policy team. You know, his foreign policy team is very complicated. And learning the lessons from his first terms, he assembled a bunch of very loyal people to his foreign policy team. Now, if you look at his team, there are 5 factions in the team. There are global hawks like Marco Rubio. These are the global hawks. And then the second is second is an Asian first group. People ask him to withdraw from Middle East, from Europe, focus on Asia Pacific, deal with China. This is the Pentagon people. This is another group. And then the third group, what we called come home American cohort, want to bring back Americans' military presence all over the world, focus on domestic issues. These are the most MAGA, hardcore MAGA people. The fourth one is economic nationalist, and he's trade secretary, commerce secretary in this group. And then the last one, the MAGA diehard people. He's a legal advisor, Smith Miller, and some of these people. These are so these 5 factions. They struggling, trying to get Trump's attention in foreign policy making. So some people already been kicked out. He's a national security advisor, been kicked out. Elon Musk is out, marginalized. And so you can see the MAGA diehard people still pushing his agenda. And his economic nationalism, the trade secretary and the commerce secretary seems to have an upper hand now. And then also the global hawks, Marco Rubio people. So this generates a lot of uncertainty for the future world politics. American also is becoming a very divided country. After the election, you can see the division, the big division in domestic politics. Republican is on the rise. The MAGA people, the populism. The Democrat basically they're still reflecting the loss of last year. There's no leader now, and so these are the current situation. Now the second, the fragmentation coming. You can see currently NATO is in such situation. Asia Pacific, and also you look at the world, the fragmentation all over the world, and the rise of the BRICS, the Asian Pacific group, Latin American, African, all have their own regional groupings. So multipolarity is one of the directions everybody is thinking about the future of world politics. Not just rise of China, but also rise of the rest. You can see the wave of globalization encountered counter waves, and so there's a spreading of pan-securitization. But this pushed people to think about how to defend their interest. Maybe the regional bloc is the good solution. So, and also regional geopolitics in some way return to the forefront of global politics. And you can see the involvement of great power declined in some ways. And so this is encourage regional solutions. Now, let me quickly turn to the third biggest problems about transformation of world order. Talking about world order, first we need to have a clear definition. What is world order? Typically, when we talk about world order in our books, we talk about overarching system of international relations, norms, and the rules and regulations, and these are the order. Order is a very loose terms. Order tend to include several elements. First, it is a set of rules and norms and principles that organize international relations. So the principles, everybody's familiar. The UN Charter have some fundamental principles: sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference in domestic affairs. These are the basic principles since Westphalia Treaty. So order including the set of the rules and the norms and principles. Also, order means you have a set of global institutions, multilateral institutions, and then written down in convention, treaty, and also organizations to enforce these rules and the norms. So we have a UN, WTO, IMF, and a bunch of regional institutions. So these are the organizational structure of order. And then I come from the hardcore, and then next layer, and then further outside next layer, the more loosened layers with the order, hardcore. Next layer will be talking about power configuration. You're talking about distribution of powers, especially how the great powers, they balance against each other. So the security arrangement, the economic systems, subsystems also means a lot to these orders. So here, the order comes very confusing. You need to clarify when people talk about order, what do you mean by order? Which part of order you're talking about. So now here I want to share some of my views about world order. Order, I spent a lot of time studying order. Order is very confusing. There are few things you need to pay attention. First, order is not something static. Order is not fixed. Orders keep changing. Order is a set of rules and norms, never fixed and never settled matter. It is always evolving, and sometimes they are result of continuous negotiations, bargains. Okay, I'll wrap up soon. And so it is very rare countries have a complete consensus about rules and the norms. Second, the respecting order does not mean yes and no dichotomous things. You respect the order, means you take the order as a whole. You respect the whole order, whole set of the rule. No, country are pragmatic. Country are very practical. They take some part of order, which they like. They disrespect the other part. So countries are selective and contingent they have a practical attitude toward the rules and orders. In some areas, it is strong. Some areas, the order is very weak. Third, international order and international balance of power are two distinct concepts, although they are closely related to each other. Order does not simply mean peace and stability, but as already mentioned, international order reflects the underlying international balance of power. Without power, it is difficult to achieve order. International order is blessed by power, but order does not equal to power. According to Steve Walt, international order inevitably reflect the underlying balance of power. So this is the relation between power and order. Fourth, yes, stronger countries always have a dominant voice in deciding order, deciding rules and institutions, but no single power can write and enforce all the rules of order. Donald Trump's attitude, indicate that American does not want to take the burden now. So the order have to change, and so we can see a bunch of countries, maybe a collective responsibility will emerge. Fifth, the Biden administration claimed U.S. is the leading country strengthen the rule-based international order, while China is violating and dismantling this rule. This is very confusing. I can tell you this is nonsense. What is rule-based? You talk about rule-based order. It's a double standard. So what rule you're talking about? You have to make clear what is the rule-based, and you can talk about who violates the international order. And then the last thing is there are power transition theory always talk about when rise of power, emerging countries always challenge the existing order. So this is called revisionism. In our book, we challenge that. This is nonsense. Rising powers, why they want to change the existing order? Take China, for example. China's rise because the existing order create the condition, facilitate China's rise. So China's taking advantage, of the order. Why it want to break the order? No, China does not want to break the order. It is now the existing power. Donald Trump want to break the order. So this is now talking about order. There are two orders. The one basic order. I'll finish up. The Westphalia type order. This is fundamental basic order. There's also liberal international order, mainly coming from the Western contribution. Now the decline of both under Donald Trump's challenge. So the two orders are under siege in disintegration. And now let me quickly turn to Ukraine war. Ukraine war is ongoing. The key thing is how it will end. If it will end, give legitimacy to Russia's invasion, that means the erosion of fundamental international principle of order, underlying order. So this is the key things. So it is not about relation of Russia and Ukraine. It is about the norm of international relations as a whole, the norm of national survival, the norm of sovereignty. So Donald Trump is dangerous because he wants to dismantling the current international order. So everybody know that. And Americans did a lot of things dismantling this order. But in the future, we need to defend the fundamental international order. And I think I want to end with the last sentence from the UN Secretary General Guterres. And he says in the last week, just 3 days ago, in celebrating the 80th anniversary of signing of UN Charter, he said, the Charter of UN is not optional. It is not a la carte menu. It is the bedrock of international relations. He called everybody, we all need to defend this order. We see two familiar patterns. Countries follow when the countries when the charter suit their interests, ignore when it doesn't. So this is not correct. We need to defend the fundamental principles of order. Otherwise, everybody will be suffered. So that's, I think, Guterres' word, I think, need us to keep in mind. Okay, I take too much long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for the insightful speech. It seems that China quite enjoys the Trump era, actually. Let's see what is the European perspective. Before doing that, shortly introduce Professor Tome. No? Thank you. Then again, the floor is yours.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to Autonoma University of Lisbon. Thank you, Özgür and Raman. Thank you, Cesran, for teaming up again for organizing this conference. And let me also give a special greeting to Professor Richard, whom I have the privilege of sharing this panel. Well, I have a PowerPoint for two reasons. One is because the slides have a lot of data, and I want to give you data quotations. I have my own analysis based on facts, so I share the facts, the data with you. On the other hand, is the best way to keep more or less on time, because a lot of information is on the slides. I don't need to explain also. And a lot of these slides are saying and having quotations that Professor Richard Hu already talked about it. So it is kind of a common PowerPoint for our two speeches. Let me just first say a few words on order in international relations, international order, and world order. Professor Richard Hu already spoke a lot about this. Of course, order is related with power, but it is much more than that. So, to summarize, when I'm talking about international order, I'm referring a certain set of institutions, rules, principles, ideas. That's why we could have in the same world order different international orders. When an international order involves all the world space, I'm using the word world order. A world order could have different international orders inside. During the Cold War, we had at least one world order with at least two international orders. The capitalist, Western, the liberal one, and the communist, the Soviet one. So in my view, these are the main characteristics of the liberal order. My argument is that after the end of the double Cold War, because we had the usual Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, but also another Cold War between China and Soviet Union. So after the end of this double Cold War, we have the globalization of the liberal order because of the US hegemony. But now, what we are witnessing is that is a transformation of the world order by the two winners of the double Cold War, China and US. That's why my understanding of the global power structure is not multipolarity. That is only narrative. It is by multipolarity because we have two superpowers again, China and US. And then we have several other great powers, regional powers, having economic power or military power or diplomatic power and so on, but only two superpowers again. So after the end of the double Cold War, we have the expansion of democracies in a liberal sense. We have the expansion of the economic trade, the institutions created by the Western countries. But after a few years, we saw also the deconstruction of the liberal world order. The expansion of the authoritarianisms, populisms, nationalisms. And it was in this moment when the liberal world order was already in retrocess that the so much loved US President Barack Obama said this: America should write the rules, call the shots. Other countries should play by the rules that America and our partners set, and not the other way around. So is having in mind, and the goal is to keep the US making the rules to others follow. But then came Trump's the first mandate. And it is the complete opposite of the idea of liberal order. Anti-multilateral institutions, leaving unilaterally the US from treaties, compromises that the US assumed before him. And it is funny, and the paradox is doing all this against the liberal world order that the US created, and in hand with Putin and Xi Jinping. Russia, by Vladimir Putin, said in 2019 in a public interview to the Financial Times that the liberal idea has become obsolete and that the Cold War was a bad thing, but at least there were some rules. Now it seems that there are no rules at all, said Vladimir Putin in 2019. And China was always criticizing US hegemonism, identified three elements of the US-led world order: the American value system, the US military alignment system, and international institutions, including the UN system. China wants only one of these three elements. It is actively against the other two elements. But then, after Trump won, came a new administration with Joe Biden, assuming that the post-Cold War era is definitely over, describing, again, a competition between democracies and autocracies, having partners and allies, democracies, and saying that the most pressing strategic challenge is coming from the authoritarian governments with a revisionist foreign policy, Russia and China. But describing at the same time China as the only competitor, having both the intent and the power to advance that goal. So it is a kind of a vision of the beginning of the Cold War, a dichotomy between democracies and autocracies that is not fit in the reality, but it is the narrative to keep at least some from the liberal world order. At the same time, China was promoting his power and influence using what I call a two-leg strategy. The first leg is the embedded revisionism, acting inside the international institutions where China is part because of the Western countries, bringing inside by the Western countries and the US. And at the United Nations in 2021, President Xi Jinping said that there is only one international system based on United Nations at its core and one international order underpinned by the international law and principles of the UN Charter. Good narrative, nice words coming from the rising China acting inside international institutions. But there is a second leg. And China was creating a world without the West, a Sino-centric world. Not only with Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives, but also institutions just like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS Plus Group, New Development Bank, a lot of bilateral, trilateral partnerships of all kind, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and so on. It is a Sino-centric, different world without the West. The funny thing is that these China's club of friends are having democracies and autocracies, developed economies and developing economies. So, at the same time, China has been very actively promoting its own vision of world order based on this slogan, global community of shared future. And launching a lot of global initiatives on development, security, civilization, and the last one, cross-border data flow cooperation initiative, underdeveloped until now. The most disturbing of these global initiatives coming from China is the Global Security Initiative. Of course, it says respect sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also takes seriously the legitimate security concerns of all countries. On my view, and most of at least European and Western view, launching this initiative in April 2022, a few months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this was to justify and legitimize Russia's invasion. That's why China is always relating the legitimate security concerns of Russia, responsibilizing not Moscow, but NATO, because of what is happening in Ukraine. It is a Pandora box. Legitimate security concerns is not the norm of international law. There are no criteria for this. At the end of the day, using legitimate security concerns, the stronger countries could invade the weaker countries. That's the danger and the Pandora box of this view coming from China. China that is also making publicly a dichotomy between two options. One is what the Chinese is calling the Cold War mentality that deepens division and antagonism, and the other one is the well-being of the mankind. They say the tug of war between these two options will shape the future of humanity and our planet in a profound way. At the same time, there is a shift in the Chinese narrative. Not only win-win, not only a peaceful rise. Now, according to President Xi Jinping, every increase of China's strength is an increase of the prospects of world peace. Give power to China if you want peace. So that's the mindset now coming from Beijing. China is, of course, Professor Bishop who said that, the biggest winner of the liberal world order after the end of the double Cold War. Using this data coming from IMF, not from the Chinese Statistics Center, comparing the share of the world in GDP based on purchase power parity, we can see in just 25 years, how the things change in terms of economic power. Share of the world is a very good way to compare power in this term, economic power, because there is, a sweet 100%. If someone is having a larger piece, it is, of course, because someone is having a very small piece. And the US and the European Union are relatively losers. We need to understand this, also to understand some visions coming from both Europe and the United States. And again, in just 25 years, look how China surpassed the US in global trade. Now, China is the first trade partner of 120 countries in the world. Look at the top 10 busiest ports in the world. A lot of them, top 10, are Chinese. No American port or European port. So this is a huge transformation of the whole system. And it was in this context that came Trump 2.0 administration. His winning is not only the presidential election, is having now the majority of the two chambers of the US Congress, and is having the majority of the judges in the Supreme Court. So it is a huge power in the same hands. In my view, is transforming the United States in a illiberal democracy. It is no longer the son of the democracy. It is an illiberal democracy. A lot of federal lawsuits against the presidential. Recently, yesterday, he said Donald Trump will persecute the journalists, the anti-patriot journalists, trying to find out the sources that are lying, according to Donald Trump, on what was destroyed on US bombing in Iran. This is not typical of a liberal leader. We know what kind of leaders are having this kind of mindset. But in terms of foreign policy, I want you to look very, very carefully to these sentences. Professor Hu already quoted one of them. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said that the post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon used against the United States. If it is assumed as a weapon used against the United States, the main goal is to destroy that weapon that is being used against the United States, obviously. Now, even more impressive is the President Trump in its inaugural address, saying that he wants to expand the territory of the United States. Always talking about Panama Canal, Canada, and Greenland, including, if needed, by force. Saying this, meaning conquering territory of other sovereign countries, including allied countries. And the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said that America does not have or seek permanent enemies. Of course, if they don't have or seek permanent enemies, they don't have or seek permanent friends and allies. The US is not interested in the moralistic and preachy approach, no liberal values. And economic dependence on China only deepens their malignant influence and complicates our US defense decision space during times of tension. We are used not to pay attention to what some political leaders are saying, but in these cases, US leadership, Chinese leadership, Russian leadership, we should pay very careful what they say. So he start distracting, for instance, dismantling the US Agency for International Development, cutting funding for the UN Relief and Work Station for Palestine territories, withdrawal again from the Paris Climate Agreement, World Health Organization, UN Human Rights Council, threatening all the time leaving World Trade Organization, and the preferred word of Donald Trump, tariffs. In my view, this is not only related with economic or trade deficit, there are clearly geopolitical goals using tariffs. And the first one is to dismantle the liberal economic order. The second one is all China's rise. And the third one, to destroy, or at the very least, divide the European Union. So when China or the European Union or other countries are negotiating with Donald Trump's team tariffs, we need to understand that there are other goals, geopolitical goals behind the tariffs coming from Donald Trump. And when we in Europe are waiting for the so-called peace plan for Ukraine, the US Vice President came and said this: the threat that I worry most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, nor China, is coming from within us European. It was a shock, of course, in Europe. And Donald Trump, President Trump, was saying that the European Union was formed to screw the United States, threatening US allies in NATO. If we are not paying more, they are not coming to defending us. And recently, last week, he was again saying that, well, the Article 5, the heart of NATO, has numerous definitions. He wants to be our friend, not ally. So that's why a lot of Europeans, and I have this quotation, from Germany's Chancellor Merz, said something that was unthinkable a few months ago. His absolute priority will be strengthen Europe as quickly as possible to achieve the independence from the US. The Americans, at least this part of the Americans, this administration, are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. So now NATO seems to mean no alternative to obsolescence. It's not a matter of budget or power. It is solidarity, credibility, cohesion. That's what makes NATO important for more than 70 years. And more or less a month after return back to the White House, surprise, surprise. 3 years after Russian invasion of Ukraine, in a General Assembly resolution, the US voted with Russia or Belarus or North Korea. Even China stay neutral in this resolution. But the US voting with Russia in a resolution calling for a lasting and just peace in Ukraine, it is unthinkable 2 months before this happening. And a few days later, we all saw the bullying at the White House by the President, Donald Trump, and US Vice President J.D. Vance against President Zelensky. It is a huge shift in the US image in the world and for the liberal world order. That's why not an European, but the former US ambassador in Ukraine, until recently, saying that this administration was putting pressure on the victim, Ukraine, rather than on the aggressor, Russia. Peace at any price is not peace at all, it's appeasement, said US ambassador to Ukraine until last April. The shock waves were, of course, affecting all the world. And in Asia Pacific, the Prime Minister of Japan said, this today's Ukraine could be tomorrow's East Asia. They know in Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asian countries, and so on, that what is happening and the end of the Ukraine war will be decisive to what will come next in Asia Pacific. Of course, they are thinking not in Russia, although Japan is having territorial disputes over South Kuril Islands, but in China. Today's Ukraine could be tomorrow's East Asia. But of course, there are a lot of doubts, not only in Europe, about the credibility of US alliance, but also in Asia Pacific. Look what the US Under Secretary of Defense for Policy, Aldrich Colby, said. I believe the costs of explicitly committing to Taiwan's defense outweigh its benefits. If we are in the shoes of the Taiwanese people, this is something to be afraid of. If Donald Trump's strategy is to divide, to conquer, to separate China and Russia was the goal, it was not succeeded. After 10 years, Xi Jinping returned back to Moscow for this parade, celebrating the end of the Second World War, calling themselves and their own countries friends of steel, strengthening the coordination to decisively counter Washington's course of dual containment of Russia and China. They, of course, during these years are promoting not only bilateral, but much more strongest comprehensive partnership, but also both with Iran and both with North Korea. Donald Trump was having a plan to end the war and the human tragedy in Gaza. It is a real state plan of creating the Riviera of the Middle East without the Palestinians. They would put outside Gaza. He canceled all other NGOs and international organizations help and funding to create this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is giving humanitarian help, but by political reasons only. And of course, it's abandoning the two-state solution. Is interfering in internal affairs of other states. This weekend, he was attacking the Israeli prosecutors, saying all this just to defend his friend, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, including threatening to stop US help of Israel. In his tour on the Middle East, doing business, a lot of business, state business and personal business at the same time, it is a lot of different things. It seems that US foreign policy is up for auction, who's giving more. And no mention on democracy or human rights, which is a little bit strange coming from a US president. Historically, there are always something saying on human rights, at least in the Middle East. But it was in the Middle East, in Riyadh, that Donald Trump made a huge and important speech saying that the US won't be giving lectures on how to live or how to govern these countries. He was criticizing the so-called nation builders and interventionists. He was offering Iran a new path. He's saying his preference always for peace. And 1 month later, he was bombing Iran, justifying peace to strength. The day after, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, created by China and Russia, made this statement, strongly condemned the military strikes carried out by the US against Iran, and saying correctly that it constitutes a gross violation of the norms and principles of the international law, Charter of the United Nations. No doubt about it. The question is, aren't Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Iran's and its proxies attacks on Israel also a violation of sovereignty, territorial integrity, international law, and UN Charter? Of course they are. So while in Beijing, for instance, didn't criticize Russia or Iran before, so they are not the defenders of the UN Charter. We cannot be, confident that if the US is attacking and violating the UN Charter, China will defend it. Oh. And recently, publicly, Vladimir Putin said this: all of Ukraine is ours. Wherever a Russian soldier steps, it is ours. The friend of steel of Xi Jinping. This is a new world saying this publicly. Even when there is a diplomatic success on peace, just like happened last Friday, there was finally a peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda after 30 years of war, mediated by Qatar and Trump's two administration. The question is peace through resource exploitation. Donald Trump said this agreement secures a lot of mineral rights in Congo for the United States. This is, the nightmare for Africa and Congo for decades. Let's see if it is succeed. Hopefully, we're going to have peace. Hopefully, but it is not the normal way to do it. So we now have a US much less popular, not only in the so-called autocratic regimes, but all over the world, including traditional allies and partners of the United States, because of Donald Trump, who is winning popularity. China. This is a good thing for China and many other countries. the soft power of the US is at its lowest position, including in Europe. To conclude, I should say that in a multipolar power structure, the US Trump 2 administration is not mere revisionist. It is revolutionary. It is promoting a great powers concert that we saw and we know from 19th century and the first part of the 20th century, with results we know and spheres of influence. We are having not order, but more disorder, a safer world for autocracies and populists and illiberals. The question is, will the US and China relationship be of a condominium? Trump wants that, or a confrontation? That's the question. Nobody has the answer right now. So a new world order is waiting to be born, but my feeling is that will be much worse than the liberal world order. It is the law of the jungle. And if the future is what we know from the past 19th century and first half of the 20th century, God save us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for the presentation and also sticking to the time span. Our time is up, but let's have a 10 minutes long Q&A session. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and then introduce yourself and direct your question to the speaker. And the participants, online participants, can also ask questions through the chat box of Zoom application. If you have any question, you can raise your hand up. More name is coming.
Thank you for both presentations. They were really actually some contradicting, but mostly in the same way. I have a question for Richard Hu. You have just said that your US first tried to dealing with China for the tariff war, and you said that if the China accepts or get an agreement with China, then the rest of the countries might follow the tax tariff. So after the last agreement with China and US about the tariff rates, so do you think that the rest of the world are going to follow the making a deal with the US, or China might change its mind about the tariff rates? Thank you.
And
Correct the question.
sure, why not? Then,
Thank you very much for the organization. Thank you very much for both speakers. At the end of the day, I don't think you are that different. I have a lot of points in common. But there is one point in common that struck me quite strongly, and I think you also are very concerned about this. It looks like the world is coming to a kind of chaos, and this is very scary for all of us. I just would like to recall the words of, I think, Eric Kissinger has said something like, if you are an enemy of US, it's very dangerous, but if you are an ally, it's fatal. Oh, so after hearing from both of you, I have a very simple question. What can we hope from China? Because it seems that China is the only option to all of this. Thank you very much.
thank you, Professor. And any question? Well,
Thank you for organization again. CESRAN became a habit for all of us, I guess. My question to two of the professors, what about the nuclear issue? Because like Middle Eastern peace or let's say economic dominance over the region sounds two main other issues, but what about the nuclear issues? Because most of the powers dominating region have nuclear powers, yet not allowing the regional powers to have one nuclear. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. There was also another question from Zoom. Dr. Özgür from Bangkok asked for both presenters about their opinion on the WTO. He asked, it is still relevant or already becoming obsolete? And I think that's the last question. So if you want, you can start, Professor Hu.
Thank you for the questions. I think they're all excellent questions. I agree. Professor Tome and I have a lot in common. And we didn't exchange PPT, but he sent the PPT to me. I didn't read until this morning I come here. So I didn't know what he was going to say. But it shows we have our view on Donald Trump and Trump's impact on the transformation of world order are largely the same. And there are minor difference, about China's role and then other things. Now, about the first questions, you're there. You're about trade deals. Donald Trump, unlike the first terms, the second term tariff war is against all world. People are struggling why he used this tactic. Maybe it's the wrong tactics. But he carries the strong mandate. So he want to show his voters, I'm defend your interest. He really want to change the current downward trend of U.S. economy, the federal debt, and then the trade deficit. He want to, turn it around so that he used a very comprehensive way to fight a trade war with others. Maybe he has some second thought now. This is not the right strategy against everybody. It should be divide and rule, target on some easy target first, and then later deal with others. Now he find out it's not easy to put a tariff against all the major trading partners. So he now began to pick up the easy target first. The easy target first was UK. Remember, he had a deal with UK, but UK had very little trade deficit with him. Actually, US export more than UK import. So that did not set the standard, did not make any influence. And he turned to Canada, he turned to EU, he even turned to Japan and India. None of these negotiations was easy, was so smooth as he expected. So he find out, he need to change strategy. He began to turn to China because China was the first one retaliate in the same way. Same tariff rate. If you increase 50%, we increase 50%. If you raise to 125, we raise to 125. China was the first country to deal with us. I think China is getting stronger than his first term. So that's why China can do this. And also, China learned the lessons from his first term. Chinese leaders have some reflection about 8 years ago dealing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump basically is bluffing, right? He's a real estate businessman. He used the same strategy to deal with his business partners. Now he play the same game in international game. So China now this time knows, how to deal with him. And very clearly, there's a strong domestic consensus, I can say, in China. Stand firm. Don't make any concessions to him. He want to play hard, we play hard. He want to do very use a very focused tool to deal with China. China also use very specific focus tool to deal with him. China's tool is rare earth, right? You cut off semiconductor, you cut off whatever airplane engine, we cut off the rare earth supply to you. And then to see how you can, bear the cost, which one will more endurable. Now he backed down. He come to China, into Geneva, into London talk. And then the London talk, basically, he make concessions, will stop those things. Let's both sides have a pause. So that's the trick. So I think he used the another 90-day pause. And so this, I think, should have some message to the rest of the world, especially to EU, to Japan, to Canada. You should think about if you really stand hard, play the hard ball, maybe the short-term cost to domestic economy. Eventually, you will prevail. That's my reading. But the EU is a complex international body. You have 25 members. You need to have a consensus. Not easy. And Japan, Canada, South Korea, both are not all not the same scale. Donald Trump hopes to crush them. So Donald Trump is meeting the hard nuts to crack first in China. India also not an easy task for him. So I bet down the road he will have problems. If the rest of the world can have a consensus, can have a united front, will be easier to deal with Donald Trump. Otherwise, he will be one by one. He now want to crush Canada first, and then after Canada, South Korea, Japan, EU, and then rest of the world. But I can tell you, this time China is more determined. We'll never yield down. You want to play this? We play this with you to the end. He only have 4 years, right? Who knows? Third term? No way. So this is my answer to your first question. The second question is, yes, the world is chaotic in the turbulence under Donald Trump. What we can hope from China? Like I said, in the trade deal, this is China's example. We need to stand up against Donald Trump. Otherwise, he will crush you. He's trying to crush Canada now. If Canada fell down, Mexico fell down, the EU will be next target. So I think we should have more coordination. EU and China should have more coordination. We should have more discussions about our trade deals with each other. And you should diversify your trade relations. You should not over-depend on U.S. security commitment. You should, actually, China in some areas is getting ahead, like green energy, like EV, like, even in the semiconductor and AI, China, some areas getting ahead. If you refuse to deal with China, if you still live in the old days, China, US and EU on the same side against China, that's wrong. Okay. And about the Middle East nuclear issues, I think from natural instinct, the big power, after they have nuclear weapons, they have the same motivation to stop the further nuclear proliferation. That's the intention being enshrined in the NPT treaty. But that's understandable. If you have one, you don't want others to have, especially the smaller countries. They consider smaller countries are irresponsible to have a nuclear weapons. So that's the difference in IR theory, because they have ones and have not ones. This is a basic problem. So that's why there's a non-proliferation regime. But there's a difference among the big P5. China probably more sympathetic to smaller countries to have nuclear weapons, to Pakistan, to North Korea, to Iran. And although in principle we are against NPT, we are signature countries, NPT treaty. But if Pakistan, North Korea, and Iran have ones, we are not using harsh sanctions against these countries, not like US. So there's a difference between China and the US. And there's a difference between P5 countries. But I should say nuclear just part of the problems. We should think about things, say China-Iranian relations. We should think in the geopolitical sense. China have interest to help Iran against Israel, against US pressures. And but Iranian seems not so exciting about to have a closer relation with China. China already offered some help, but Iranian didn't take it. So that's what happens. So there are a lot of lessons to learn in geopolitics. But as I said, the current dynamics for transformation of world order exist in regional politics as well. So depends on how the future regional policies will evolve. Okay, thank you.
I'm more or less on the same page of Professor Richard, but I'm answering on the opposite sense of the questions. So first question from Dr. Ploberger, online from Bangkok, on WTO. Is it obsolete? I think it is. The organizations are what the member states make of them, and WTO is obsolete since years, including Joe Biden's presidency didn't promote nothing important related with WTO, the norms and rules and the court, everything it is stopped. So I think we need a new international organization. WTO could keep the name, but the organization needs to change the nature and the way it works. On the nuclear issue in the Middle East, I'm agree with Professor Hu's perspective, but I must say we are in a very dangerous moment. We have no regime for strategic weapons. The only one to control strategic weapons, and in particular nuclear weapons, is the NPT. So the question is, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons and it was invaded by Russia. North Korea left NPT in 2003, is having nuclear weapons since 2006, is doing everything, and nobody is touching North Korea. Iran was attacked by two nuclear weapons, nuclear powers, Israel and the United States. So the question is, will Iran leave NPT? And now the regime and the country feeling more insecure will definitely try to have nuclear weapons. If that's so, it is the end of the non-proliferation treaty. We're going to have proliferation in the Middle East because with Iran on this course, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey at least will for sure try to have also nuclear weapons. And then South Korea, and of course Japan. So it will be a much, much more dangerous world with many other countries having nuclear weapons. And in Europe, Germany, and if Germany is having nuclear weapons, Poland is having also. So it is a decisive moment. I would prefer dealing with this diplomatically, another agreement that was made in 2015, but it is impossible with Donald Trump. If I was in Iranian shoes, I would know compromise with Donald Trump. How come? Because he left the agreement in 2018. He just now bombed our facilities. So in the middle of negotiations, so how can I make an agreement in a good faith if I'm not confident on the other side? That's a huge, huge problem. Finally, in what your question, what can we hope from China? China has always worked strategically, taking something from the opportunities. Donald Trump is a huge opportunity for China. Donald Trump is not responsible, the only responsible for the transformation of world order. It is coming from different reasons, but is accelerating the deconstruction, what left of the liberal order, is accelerating the declining of the US in all senses, is polarizing, dividing this in civil war in the United States, and is having all allies and partners, not only traditional rivals, but also allies and partners against the United States. So China is having another opportunity to show stability, to promote multilateralism, and against this illiberal democracy coming from the US, promoting its democracy that works. It is the name of a white paper that China published in 2021, a democracy not liberal, but a democracy that works. And it shows that it is a rock, independently of the winds and something that is going on in turmoil in the international relations and the world. China is there. We are confident. If we are making an agreement, we respect the agreement. We are not respecting the international law all the time, as we saw in South China Sea or in relation with Russia and so on. But if we make an agreement, we respect that. We respect including the small countries. We attend your interests. That's the narrative, promoting a new vision. So at the end of the day, we don't know what happens. Nobody knows. But this is a huge opportunity for China. And if it is able to promote interests and values of the others as well, it will be succeeded. And it will be the next hegemon and world leader after Donald Trump II will destroy the leadership and the power of the United States.
Thank you, Dan. I think it was a quite good start for the conference. I'm thankful for both speakers here for their contribution. So now we can have a break and then carry on with the rest of the panels. And the next panel will be here at 1:30 p.m. So have a nice conference. Okay, thank you.